You're listening to Second Cut. This is the independent podcast where we talk about topics in film theory, history, criticism, etc. I'm Jacob, and I'm the one not giving my scarf to strange men.
I'm Sam. I'm the one whose back would probably give out if I had to walk all the way across Australia with a baby for an extended period of time.
I'm Kieran. I'm the one who, if the world was going to end and only one person could live and you had to live with them, Vincent Price actually would be probably very interesting as a person to live with through the apocalypse.
Yeah. At least he could cook for you.
This is true, as long as the dishwasher was working.
Good. What is this reference? Is this within the movie or
No? Vincent
No.
Price had several kind of cookbooks.
He was famously, he was famously a gourmet chef in his free time, and I think he had a TV show for a time, didn't he, as well?
I unfortunately missed Abattoir 2015. I'd booked a concert many months before, and on that night at Abattoir, Victoria Price was going to be there, and there was a sit-down meal with her using recipes from Cooking with Vincent. But you go online, and one of the main things, because he did a couple of like interviews and TV things, but one of his things was cooking salmon in a dishwasher. And the idea was that you kind of put it in the foil and put it on one of the trays and then use it to go steam through and use it as a steamer so that it then cooks the salmon like that. That was his kind of weird thing. And it's like, I always wanted to try it out, but never...
British cooking, folks.
Yeah. And I'm also going to see if I can actually flip my video around because it's annoying the hell out of me. There we go.
Yeah. I don't blame us for that one of Vincent Price. Vincent Price was from Boston. So.
Yeah. It's nothing to do with the British.
It's not British cooking technique.
No, although Victoria Price was on a like "Who do you think you are?" sort of show at one point, it was very put out that they couldn't find any connections to Wales because she's like, "Well, it's Price. Price is a Welsh name. What you know?" It turns out that it's a kind of butchering of Dubris, which is Dutch instead. So it goes with that. I think she then found out she did have some vague connection, some like 6-7 steps of separation to Wales, but was very upset by that.
I am now too. Sorry for that.
Yeah. Anyway, this isn't a Vincent Price episode somehow.
No. He's in one of the movies, but we're doing unusual zombies or alternative zombies. Let's see. What is just a normal zombie, I suppose? Let's start there.
Yeah, Sam, take this one.
I mean, you kind of say kind of Night of the Living Dead, most people would say is kind of like for kind of the baseline, the progenitor of most of it, even though obviously it was influenced by plenty of other earlier horror films itself. I mean, the main reason for this topic is because 28 years later, I still want to call it 28 weeks, 28 years later is coming out, or it's out today.
It is out today, I think.
It should have been 28 factorial days later. That would have been a lot funnier.
Yeah. And even to this day, I believe Danny Boyle and Alex Garland deny that they're zombies, even though they're effectively zombies in their
the bloody zombies, shut the hell up.
They want to make a distinction between infected and zombies. I mean, yeah, if we're being technical, yeah, a zombie is a reanimated corpse. They're going to be dead first, I suppose. Whereas the creatures in 28 days and other similar zombie films, they're usually still alive, but it's got some virus that's making them behave usually rabidly, and hyper aggressively. But yeah, I mean, you can split off hairs kind of if you're being as like a purist in terms of what a zombie is, but yeah, essentially it's taking kind of folkloric kind of ideas and kind of modernizing them within cinema, turning them into a movie monster. I mean, they've been a movie monster, since the 30s, so in various forms. Obviously, it goes back to voodoo and various folkloric kind of ideas before that.
I was going to say the original thing was it's essentially, if anyone's seen Serpent and the Rainbow, that is kind of the original kind of thing. It was a very rare thing in ancient voodoo, kind of in the various parts of Africa that I'm going to blanket as Africa because this is how we do it, without knowing exactly which kind of tribes or cultures it comes from on the entire continent. As if people talk about it like it's a city, you know, and it's like I can't remember. But it came across eventually to Haiti. Is the main thing, and it was a rarely done ritual, and I can't remember exactly why they would do it, but there were instances where somebody would be injected with some kind of concoction that would technically leave you alive, but so faintly that the doctors would pronounce you dead. And this is like 150 years ago, so obviously, you know, medical advances weren't that high. Because and what they do is they bury you in a very shallow grave, so that like at night when you're coming out of it, they could the people that are kind of the kind of voodoo, whatever it is, that had kind of done this to you, would then dig you back up, and they'd spirit you away to somewhere, and for years and years and years essentially go, you know, we've brought you back from the dead, we've taken your soul, you have no soul, essentially through a series of like drugs and brainwashing and all that kind of thing, make you think you have no soul for years and years and years, and then you'd kind of be just let go. Again, I can't remember the exact specifics of why this is all done in the ceremonies. I can only remember the basics. But you'd be kind of let go. So then if you're like somebody that's lost a family member and several years later you see them shambling down the street going, I have no soul, I've lost everything, somebody's stolen my soul, like what are you going to think? That they've returned from the dead? Like and so variations of that is kind of where it came from. And again, it got transplanted mainly to kind of the Caribbean. Haiti is sort of the main hotspot for it, but I'm guessing a lot of the other nations there as well have similar things. And it's kind of this tradition that then things like White Zombie and I Walked the Zombie will take from, and then it will go through the various things. But yeah, Romero kind of really changed it to the flesh eating hordes, as we know the zombies are now.
Though he referred to them as ghouls, didn't he, initially?
Yeah, because the whole thing with them being zombies, they are technically different because there wasn't a name for them yet. You know, the zombies, it was a completely different kind of creature that we've now kind of transplanted over to this kind of monster.
Yeah, we sort of have the Western cultural zombie creature there. I would think of Walking Dead probably as my go-to. Like, what is a zombie? Yeah, watch that. Like it's a living dead person, human, and it eats brains. If it bites you, it's gonna turn you into a zombie as well. So, you know, like the width and breadth of like what is a zombie, like you can call I Am Legend a zombie. You can call uh Play a Nine from Outer Space zombies. Like any sort of human that has died and become a monster. You know, and obviously there are distinctions with vampires. But I think the line can get so blurred.
There is a lot of crossover there, isn't there? And I think that was the same with like kind of mythology, you know, from the old world, you know, from Eastern Europe especially. I think there is sort of blurring of the lines in terms of, you know, the maybe different ways to refer to the dead reanimated, or, you know, just, you know, something evil transforming, you know, someone you once knew beyond recognition. You know, it's terms kind of were used more interchangeably, you know, decades back. But you know, now they seem to refer to more specific things.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, I did
putting the link on the socials.
Yeah, I mean, I did pick up. I was trying to think about like films over the past, you know, couple of decades that really stood out to me, because there are literally thousands and thousands of zombie movies. I mean, it's one of the most popular genres, especially with, you know, filmmakers, you know, first starting out, because in theory they don't need a lot of money to have a go at one.
And the zombie apocalypse essentially gives you a very good excuse not to have a lot there, because it is the end of the world. Everything's dead.
Yeah.
You can literally shoot it where you don't need to get traffic permits, have like cars
Yeah.
going past, and you just shoot it where nothing's happening. You put a couple of fires there, you throw some trash out in the middle of nowhere, and go, "Oh, it's the apocalypse." And what was it called? Zombies.
Yeah.
You get one person
Yeah.
to run at somebody and go, "Okay, zombies," and you move on.
Yeah, I mean, people were still they were astounded, weren't they, when 28 days later first came out, and you had that shot of Cillian Murphy walking across Westminster Bridge. You know,
Yeah.
literally just shot it at like 4 in the morning in the summer. You know, just
Yeah.
But then obviously everyone kind of comes, you know, when COVID was on, you know, all these shots for London, you know, so it's just like 28 days later, you know,
It was
no one can
exactly the
go
same.
out
Yeah,
anymore.
it's ridiculous.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, if you know the rules are a bit less tight, you know, I'm sure a lot of people would have loved to do like low budget horror films, take advantage of the deserted streets a bit more. I got thinking about this just amongst like the thousands of films we've had, just the ones that have kind of stood out to me as doing something a bit different with the idea of like the past couple of decades. So I don't know if you guys have seen these ones, but I sort of Blood Quantum, which was
Heard
a
of it,
Canadian
haven't
horror
seen it.
film. Canadian horror film from about 5 years ago, I think, and basically it's set on a First Nation reservation in Canada, basically, and this virus is spreading like throughout the population, but most First Nation people are actually immune to the virus, so it's only the white
That's
people
fantastic.
that are kind of getting infected,
I
basically.
think
It's,
I think I vaguely
quite
remember hearing about it in some kind of academic article
yeah,
somewhere, which is where I'm
yeah,
remembering this vague plotline
yeah.
from.
But that was kind of like quite an interesting idea in terms of like First Nations kind of being the heroes and kind of fighting against this horde of feral white people basically coming for them. There was a Pontypool, which I watched for the first time last year. I mean,
Heard of.
it's a fascinating little film. I mean, I can't say it's kind of it bowled me over, but it's a really interesting idea, and that's basically it's like a radio DJ. Basically, his station is besieged by zombies, but then they find out the virus is actually spread by a sound and a particular phrase. You know, if it's spoken to you and then you start to repeat it, you become infected. Basically, and that's how it kind of comes about, which I think is a really interesting idea. I know it sounds a bit like a Doctor Who episode. And then there was I haven't met anyone else who's seen this. I just happened to pick it up from HMV when I was at uni, just out the bargain bin. But a British film called Colin, which was like a really
Vaguely heard
micro
of.
budget zombie movie. And the twist for that is basically the entire thing is from the zombie's perspective. So the main character Colin gets infected in the first scene, and you're just following throughout the film, and it's the zombie just going about his life, going to a place he remembers, and just trying to kind of remember who he was, basically. But you know, just doesn't shift from his perspective at all, which is I think is really interesting. I mean, yeah, just honestly, just I mean, student film I made, you know, you know, school was probably looks about as good as it does. It's a really cheap
Yeah.
film, but it's again the idea kind of carries it through. And then a couple from Southeast Asia from the past couple of years. So there was the Sadness,
Oh,
which is a Taiwanese film.
it's
Yeah,
brutal,
and
the sadness.
it's really brutal. Yes, it's a set in Taipei, and basically a couple trying to get across the city while basically the virus has just caused humanity to revert to their kind of feral instincts, basically, and they just. But it's not just like biting people and attacking people. It's literally shredding people's faces off, and
It's
yeah, it's
I,
really gnarly
I
stuff.
I will point out that if anybody, and I believe it's still available to get, got for the film magazine our final thing we put out, which is the publication, which you can get for still only £2. I did I think it's top 15 horror films of 21st centuries or the
Yeah,
2000s, like, and the sadness
yeah,
was in there, and I watched
yeah.
it
It's great.
specifically because I'm like, I know the sadness is good. I'm going to watch it to see if I should include it. I'm like, yes, it is. It is good, but it is an absolute bloodbath. It is no holds barred, visceral, violent,
Yeah,
depressing
I
movie.
think even if you're like a seasoned gorehound, it really does kind of linger with you, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Makes you cause like a visceral reaction. You're wincing and like almost covering your
yeah,
eyes. There are a few of
it's
the
insane.
images. Yeah. Um, and finally, a Netflix film from a few years ago again called Alive, and basically a Korean gamer has to survive in his zombie-infested apartment block without the internet. So it's like him really just kind of remembering what life was, without his use of technology, but it's just in this nightmare of situation, trying to communicate with this girl who lives in the next apartment block over, and the can communicate by sending messages by drone and stuff like that. But
I think I saw the first
phones,
10 minutes of that.
Yeah, but that's again really interesting. Nice commentary on kind of our reliance on technology and tendency, to just sit at home staring at screens all day.
I was going to say it's amazing that zombies seem to actually quite like apartment blocks. It seems to be a place that we can do them, because obviously thinking of Wreck, obviously,
I mean, which is one of my go-tos, definitely my top 5 zombie films. Wreck.
It is one of the realistically only good found footage movies ever made. I used to think there were 3, there may be 4 or 5 now, because I'm putting in things like Lake Mungo is very good, and Afflicted actually is an interesting one, which is found footage. Somebody turning into a vampire is interesting, but Wreck is in there. But then there's also, if you've seen it, I think it's from 2018. Is it The Night Eats the World? It's a French film, which is essentially like a drummer. Or he likes drums, but it's against zombie apocalypse, trapped in an apartment block in Paris. So you got those all. So it seems to be kind of one of these. I mean, this is the question: do we count something like Evil Dead, like the Deadites? I mean, it's like one of the things where it's like it's a zombie without calling them a zombie.
Technically, it's more of a possession film, isn't it? Really,
I was thinking more demonic there.
But at the same time, they're kind of still reanimated corpses, eat your face off. So something like Evil Dead Rise, like you change a couple of plot details around. It's a zombie movie. You know what I mean?
Unless you're like one of the main kind of speaking kind of antagonists of each film, then the hordes are made up of zombies, basically, aren't they?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to a couple of others. One, The Girl with All the Gifts, very good film. The book is great as well. And a very good performance by, I think it's Sania Nanua is the lead girl in that. She's not done that much, or she hadn't done that much a couple of years ago. I think that was like her first lead. Very good for a first time, especially as a young child actress with not that much experience as well.
And that idea about like a kind of a fungal kind of pandemic, basically, again, is kind of catching fire of it, isn't it? In recent years, especially things like The Last of Us. It's different enough from like that was normally like a blood virus, isn't it? Traditionally, which passed on by biting, but this idea of like spores kind of infecting you is kind of interesting.
And then I'm obviously going to give the shout out. This is the podcast, which is the second cut of The Dead, but I'm obviously going to give the shout out to One Cut of the Dead, which is one of my favorite films ever. And if you haven't seen it, get a load of mates round and go into it blind, watch it all, like all hour and a half. And we have to qualify that, because there's going to be people going, what the bloody hell's going on? All the way through. And your life will be completely transformed.
Yeah, because every time you think you've worked it out, then they'll throw in another curveball and they'll completely rewrite everything you understood about it.
Again, watching it
about 3 times.
Watching it at a festival with One Cut of the Dead with an audience that knew absolutely pretty much nothing, and it was incredible. And it was good because sort of we were going through, because there's a prize for a top audience rated film. And we were going through, and before One Cut of the Dead came out, was shown to us. Up to that point, I thought Tumbad was going to win it. And Tumbad, by the way, if you haven't seen Tumbad, amazing film, really good. I think they're making a Tumbad 2 as well, which I'm excited for. And I was like, One Cut of the Dead, this thing's going to have to go some to beat it. I'd never heard of it. And then it happened, and everyone was like, yeah, there's no contest anymore. One Cut of the Dead is taking it, So yeah, I'll give props for that. It's still a zombie movie.
Shaun of the Dead is a zombie movie, but everybody's seen that.
Zombieland,
Zombieland. Yeah, I realized watching this, I tend to watch more comedy zombie movies or just old zombie movies. Like I really probably never would have watched Cargo without this episode. So.
It's one of those ones that I was like, I'll get around to it at some point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think zombies, they are a subgenre that do tend to lend themselves quite well to comedy horror, don't they? There's quite it's probably more comedy zombie films than there are any other kind of comedy horror, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think even unintentional comedy horror movies,
Yeah,
sometimes. And then you get weird stuff where they throw sort of zombies or zombie related things into the mix. Like I think of The Wailing, where you just have that
yeah,
scene for like 10, 15 minutes where they're beating up on a zombie and it's like, what the hell does this have to do with anything
yeah,
going on? And somehow it works out of nowhere. Um, but then I was even thinking of the one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema, which is in, of course, Zombie Flesh Eaters with zombie versus shark fight, uh, which is just like, why not? Sod it, let's just go, And it's just like, you've got to go some. But then again, this is 1979, I think it was. Jaws had come out a couple of years before. Dawn of the Dead had come out a couple of years before, and they were titling it Zombie 2 to
yeah,
try and hitch off Dawn of the Dead, even though it had nothing to do with Dawn of the Dead. This is Italy, and it's just like, should we have a zombie fight a shark? What sense does that make? None. Will it look great? Yes, and it'll be really fun.
yes,
Let's do it. Like, I couldn't tell you the rest of the plot other than there's that scene and there's the kind
the
of
eyeball.
splintering wood to the eye, yeah, which is
Yeah,
gnarly. Aside from those two scenes, like the rest of the movie can kind of sod off, but Fulci gets those two scenes and it's so good.
yeah,
I'm now wishing we had named our podcast after a fake sequel for a movie that like can't have a sequel. But speaking of other movies, I'm realizing, doing reading today, I meant to do I Walked with a Zombie, and I'm not sure if they are alternative, which is maybe why I forgot about it.
yeah.
But I took a zombie literature class, and we did White Zombie first, and then we did I
Yes.
Walked with a Zombie, and I liked I Walked with a Zombie a lot more than I like White Zombie.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, just let's get it out of the way. I know Bela Lugosi has a lot of affection for his performance in this, and it's nice to see him get a role with plenty of dialogue and stuff. Not just making noises. But I think this one hasn't aged especially
No.
well. And
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was made. I mean, well, I'm sure you'll get into it, but as far as I can remember, it was made in like 12 days with kind of leftover sets.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just like, so it was like a Roger Corman production before Roger Corman was making things,
Yes.
born kind of thing.
Yes.
It's
He
insane.
literally made, he said like $900 or something making this movie. Like, it's just an insanely small amount of money, super cheap production.
I mean, he was given the option for a percentage gross, but he didn't have faith in the film at the time. So, and he deeply regretted that later on because it was actually a modest hit at the box
I
office.
wouldn't have either. Like, it's such schlock. And I went and read like an essay about this, and it was about how his character, whose name is Murder, that is his character's name. He
No, never actually said though on the screen.
That's true. And you know what? Even if it was, this movie is so just not interesting. I didn't pay enough attention to see that. But they use sets from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, corridors from Frankenstein, chairs from The Cat and the Canary, and they also use sets from The King of Kings, 1927. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is literally going in and going, can we use this set for a day? Yeah, sure, why not? Sort of thing. It's ridiculous.
So the analysis I was reading about this, because it takes place in Haiti, it is voodoo zombies, and Bela Lugosi plays a voodoo zombie necromancer something or other. He is the bad guy. He makes zombies. So they analyze, well, this is taking place in Haiti. There's obviously a huge colonial history in Haiti. It was the first country to actually have like a slave revolt that took over the country. Really interesting history for Haiti. And sort of the debate is the bad guy white or is he native? And this person proposed, oh, he's actually a mix of the two, and that's what makes him sort of scary, is that he represents that Creole identity. And like this movie's just so stupid that I don't think you can analyze it and actually like look for an answer, because it's just such a schlocky horror movie made in an era where, oh, this came out and made a lot of money. This came out and made.
Yeah.
We're gonna make a really cheap zombie movie and kill it at the box office, and boy did they.
Yeah.
Well,
And
when
there-
you
and there
say
are so
make a
ma-
cheap zombie movies, this was the first, or is it billed as the
Yeah,
first
that too.
full-length zombie movie?
Yeah.
So it is trying something new,
Yeah.
admittedly, on that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so new that they have to explain what a zombie is, like just in words, just for people in the audience who most often wouldn't know. I mean, it's literally the opening. There's quite a few movies like from this era, kind of exoticizing kind of these cultures, and something like that. And literally, the opening scene is like, "Oh, are two white people walking through? Oh, isn't this culture? Aren't these traditions weird? Oh, look at that, honey! Look at those strange men over there."
I was going to say,
What's the deal?"
Universal would never do something like this at all.
No.
Well, what are they doing? Oh, they're making sure that the bad guy doesn't come dig up the body and turn it into a zombie. Those
Yeah.
natives.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing I find interesting is that you say kind of is the bad guy white or anything like that. I think it's interesting that he's just he's an outsider, but he's
Yeah,
not
he's
black. So he is still a
the thing about
threat.
the thing about Bela Lugosi with his persona and his accent, he's always coded as other.
Yeah.
He can't not be. That's how Hollywood saw him and
Yeah,
how
and
audiences saw him.
and the presentation of this, you do have the things with the eyes where you have kind of
Yeah.
the highlight over the eyes, which is done by the lighting, and you have those long sort of push-ins towards him. Both of those are direct copies from Dracula, and everybody would know him from Dracula. It is directly playing off his persona, and it's not like this doesn't happen now. Apparently, when Julie Taymor did her version of Titus Andronicus, she deliberately cast Anthony Hopkins because near the end, but adaptation of the Shakespeare play, Titus Andronicus does take two people and bakes them into a pie and feeds them to their mother. Yeah, this is Shakespeare. This is why Shakespeare's classy. There is forced kind of like cannibalism and a lot. But at the end of this big speech that he does, he makes the equivalent of the kind of slurping, the Hannibal Lecter thing. And that was a deliberate thing because she wanted people to connect the two as a deliberate thing. It was, can you recreate the equivalent of? So it's not like this was just a thing that was done then. No,
Sure.
it is still done now, playing on the star persona.
So they're not just stealing sets; they're stealing everything.
Pretty much.
Once again, reinforcing this is just soulless crap. Trying to make not trying to make a zombie, trying to make a monster movie, because Dracula was already out. Well, we gotta.
Frankenstein was out.
Yeah, we gotta do something different, but the same, because that's what it's a gothic tale. It's about the invasion of this poor, beautiful white woman by the evil, I don't know, necromancer dude, but whatever he is, he's doing voodoo stuff. So the way he turns people into zombies, and this is important in terms of alternative, is that he gets a candle and he whittles it down into the shape of a man or a woman, and then I don't know how it specifically knows which man or woman. I guess that's where the magic comes in, and then he sets it on fire and it turns them into a zombie. I guess she dies, or they think she's dead. They have to put her in the crypt and then go rob the crypt, and then she's just essentially a soulless sex slave, because the sort of corollary to her is we know that Bela Lugosi's character has this mill run by these zombified, Afro-Haitian inhabitants, and so there's definitely an anti-slavery message going on, where it's like, slavery is bad. I do know that from this movie.
Well, I mean, that's the whole
but
point.
the horror is that it is a white zombie, as the title tells us.
Yeah. So that you have this weird thing where obviously it is kind of playing on the kind of white people's fears that you could become othered and reduced to the level of people that are not white. But there is also the thing
that
that
is
the bad
Donald
guy,
Trump's platform, actually.
is I mean, Bela Lugosi kind of says, it's like they never work, they work long hours, never complain, and then goes, you could use some of these on your plantations. And the fact that the bad guy says this implies that this is wrong. And I was actually thinking this, because and you guys know, I was going to do a kind of after Sinners, 5 films to watch in relation to Sinners throughout history that might have influenced it. And White Zombie was one of them, because obviously in White Zombie as well, you have people that are from outside of the country. They are Irish, they're white people coming in and essentially taking control of a black community that are still under their influence. So and it's in the past, it's set in the 30s, isn't it? So it's around about the same time period. So I was thinking of, there is a kind of a thematic connection to White Zombie there, and I think the actual plot line itself is not the greatest. And I mean, there are long stretches of kind of where there's no dialogue, essentially just because it's easier to shoot like that, and they're on a very tight budget, and to be able to do what they did on a very tight budget is impressive. But I think it's more interesting now as a historical artifact, rather than as a piece of compelling entertainment. It's still fun in its own way, but I think more
it's
interesting.
definitely a curiosity that occupies an interesting kind of place in like the evolution of the kind of early horror film genre. But as just taken in isolation as a piece of work, it's not great.
Yeah, I mean, I still enjoy it. I still like it. Maybe that's, again, the fact that Bela Lugosi is in it, and Bela Lugosi is the main bad guy, and he's big and evil, and he's got the eyes going and everything like that. And it is kind of, I like kind of the historical artifact kind of side of horror movies and stuff like that. I get a kick out of it, and it's black and white. And for some reason, I know this shouldn't be the case, but now kind of films that are in black and white feel cozier and more enjoyable because they're cozy in a way. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but there are flaws. Like, you don't care about the characters really;
No.
they're just there for plot points.
One is good suitor and one is evil suitor who would turn her into a zombie. I thought at one point she said she met her fiance on the boat coming over, and I had to rewind and make sure I didn't misunderstand that.
Yeah, it's a weird one. That's, again, I want to know how quickly it was written, because it's apparently based off a couple of novels, or inspired by a couple of novels.
It was Magic Island from 1929, which I'm sure is a richer text in terms of looking at this from like the whole Caribbean slavery perspective. But that's where I wish I had done I Walked with the Zombie, is it has those same themes, those same ideas, but it has a good plot and it has better acting. But it's still looking at like the sugarcane stuff. There's the outsider from Canada, and like it's just it's a way better movie. It's Val Lewton too, who is like the 1940s horror master. So watch I Walked with the Zombie. Only watch White Zombie because it's free on YouTube.
I mean, no one knew how to make schlock look a lot more expensive than it was than Val Lewton. He had a real good kind of thing going, as a creative driving force, as a producer. Whereas this, it's all very kind of surface level thematically, and patched together and just seemingly rushed out there, just capitalize on Lugosi's kind of rising fame, I suppose. Because at this point, obviously, he's done Dracula. He's done Murders in the Rue Morgue as well. I think that was earlier in the same year.
I think it's in 32. Yeah, I can't remember what the principal photography was. Filmed 11 days in March 32, so he might have filmed Rue Morgue the previous year. Yeah. Obviously, the other thing we got out of this was Rob Zombie's career.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because obviously his original band White Zombie was named after this movie, and then when they disbanded, he did his solo stuff and then went on to do all his films and stuff based off that. So this did give us Rob Zombie. It does have House of a Thousand Corpses and all that stuff. So
yes.
I mean, every kind of again, like the Haitian culture and everything, very surface level kind of xenophobic kind of reading of it. Kind of weird these customs are. Very much kind of a European settler kind of perspective on it. I mean, I suppose like there's no real kind of proper characters, for kind of anyone who's black, either they're literally like plot devices and kind of
Yeah.
just there to stand around and be the kind of the spectacle themselves almost. I mean, I'll give them the credit, that there are actually some real black actors in this, but they fill out the crowds with guys in blackface, though. So I'm not going to give them too much credit.
Yeah. Again, this is 1932. It's not until is it Hattie MacDonald in Gone with the Wind that kind of anybody that isn't white starts to get a little bit of recognition.
And even then, they're still playing servants, but they have a bit more about them and some interesting dialogue.
I was going to say, we've got a couple decades to go before Martin Luther King and everything like that, and this is an American production as well, so it's not great, but there are some black actors in 1932. Don't say anything aside from like a couple of them giving a couple of lines of exposition, but it's a start, I guess. And it's still vaguely enjoyable. And there is admittedly a couple of beautiful mats with the castle on the hill, and there's some interesting dissolves that are happening and fades and wipes and stuff where they're kind of trying to split screen with like the telepathy thing going on. Which for 32 is they're at least trying.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're trying out those ideas, not quite there yet, but they're attempting something different and seeing what the medium can do differently to, say, theatre.
Yeah, so definitely have a look at it if you're kind of interested in kind of a curiosity or a novelty or tracing roots academically.
But watch I Walked the Zombie for a better, more entertaining and well put together take on this, a decade later.
Yes, certainly.
Yes.
Yep. Cool. We're good with that?
Yeah, do yours, Kieran.
Yeah, because after sort of the 40s, the kind of whole thing dies down a bit, doesn't it, really? I mean, if you after White Zombie and I Walked with a Zombie, can you really think of another proper zombie movies until like the mid to late 60s?
Yeah, if it's an undead creature, it tends to be a vampire, doesn't it? After this, you don't really see zombies in this form again until the 60s, really.
Yeah, and kind of part of the reason for that is Richard Matheson. And so his first novel, I Am Legend, came out in 1955, and has the interesting thing because it is realistically a zombie apocalypse movies, but they're not zombies, they're vampires. Because we don't have the zombie as it is now to have a zombie apocalypse. They don't exist yet. It is here a vampire novel about the vampire apocalypse, and the last person who in the book is Robert Neville. I think it's Robert Neville. Yes, it is. Just to double check. In this film, it's Robert Morgan, I believe. I don't know why they changed the name. It's stupid. Because in my head,
they kept the name in the other two film versions, in the Charlton Heston and the Will Smith versions, didn't they? Yeah, it's weird.
But so I don't know why they changed it. And it's his holding out essentially for years and years and years, grimly clinging on to humanity and fighting off the hordes that continuously come back and try and break him down.
And really ineffectually try and get in his windows every night.
Yeah, I was going to say every night. Yeah, it's fairly, it's amusing to a certain point. But the interesting thing, I mean, for vampire literature, and actually the whole Dracula conference I was at, admittedly there were many panels going on at once, so I didn't see all of the talks. I saw like a third of them roughly, but I didn't actually hear any kind of discussion of I Am Legend when it came to vampire stories. Lots of the modern stuff, lots of like people talking about Anne Rice, people talking about the 70s Draculas, all these things, but sort of I Am Legend wasn't actually brought up, which I think is a mistake, because I Am Legend and then kind of subsequent adaptations, the whole point of it was, can you take mythology and superstition and find a rational explanation for it? And that's what it does. And their whole thing was that it is a bacteria in the blood that has evolved to take it over. It doesn't like sunlight and all these things. And there's interesting things in it where sort of the kind of parts of the individual person's belief is still maintained. So the cross only works on people who are Christian. If it's somebody who is Buddhist or Hindu or something like that, relevant symbols and iconography for them will work, whereas the cross won't.
Yeah.
Which is something that isn't really carried on, but is a really fascinating idea that nobody else uses. They just assume that Christian symbols work on everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting watching this in like a post-COVID world, and like the early scenes with Vincent Price and the other scientists discussing how this virus is spreading, and there's theories behind it and stuff like that. And so it's sprung up in Europe, and it may arrive here. How would we deal with it? How would we manage it if it did get to the US?
So obviously Matheson kind of made his name with I Am Legend 55, and then the year after he came out with The Incredible Shrinking Man, The Shrinking Man, which gets made into The Incredible Shrinking Man with various people. But he'd also kind of made a name for himself in the 50s, writing a good half, really, of the X-Files. Not the X-Files, Twilight Zone, that's the one I'm after. Twilight Zone. Sorry, the various kind of weird stuff getting together. I know Jacob's like, what the hell was going on?
I was wondering. Travel forward in time.
That's how powerful Richard Matheson actually is.
I was wondering why this felt like a Twilight Zone episode. So it's all coming together.
Yes. So Richard Matheson wrote a load of the stuff for the first couple of seasons, and also wrote the very famous. What's it? 20,000 feet. Fear at 20,000 feet.
The gremlin on the plane with Shatner.
Yeah, with William Shatner, which is possibly the most famous Twilight Zone episode out there. Yeah. And then it's interesting that he also writes the first 1 or 2, possibly 3 of the Poe Corman films. And obviously the first one, For the House of Usher, starred Vincent Price, which is probably why the connection comes in when they make I Am Legend into a film as Last Man on Earth. And they have to do that because they changed the ending, which means that the actual reason for it be called I Am Legend doesn't work. They've bring Vincent Price into it from there.
Yeah, and apparently Matheson thought he was woefully miscast. He didn't think he was right for the role at all.
You know what? Watching it again, and I first saw this again at Abattoir Festival, where people came in and did a new live score for it, which was really interesting. I watched this again, and I thought Vincent Price was miscast. As much as a Vincent Price fan as I am, the whole point of, I'm going to call him Robert Neville, because in my head, I think of the first few pages where there's the vampire's like, come out, Neville, and that's all I hear in my head, so it's Neville, I don't care. The whole point of him is that he's grim and determined, he's haggard, but you have to have the belief that he will do everything against the odds. Yes, he's weary, but he has like a John Wick style determination to live at all costs.
Which is why both Charlton Heston and believe it or not, Will Smith were really good casting for the role.
Yeah. But Vincent Price, and again, he's into his late 50s, early 60s. He has the haggard part of living in a vampire apocalypse for 3 years, but does not have the feel of somebody that's like gritting their teeth at all costs.
You don't feel like he's a MacGyver that he could put stuff together and improvise, particularly.
No.
He's also fancy seeming. Like you said, he's a gourmet chef. If you told me the character was, I'd be like, yeah.
I mean, it's like one of his more emotional performances. I mean, he's got some good moments. There's like when he breaks down, they're really good. But yeah, it is odd seeing him in this kind of a role, this kind of self-sufficient kind of man of action. That's not really Vincent Price.
And again, it would have been trading on his recently kind of re-rising to power from star fame. I mean, he was already very well known, established thing, especially in LA. He was a massive part of the arts community, started up loads of things. He was sponsored by, I can't remember which kind of supermarket it was. It wasn't Walmart or something like that, but it was the equivalent of, to kind of promote, kind of essentially use art, and they were going to sell off like expensive pieces of art and stuff like that. He was very well known as a celebrity. He was going on talk shows, again, doing all the stuff. So the trading on his star power for it, and because it is a Matheson novel, I'm guessing that was one of the things that swayed him, and it's a very influential Matheson novel, possibly one of the most influential kind of stories or ideas in horror, and I don't think people realize it. But he's miscast because he doesn't have the kind of rugged, kind of determined feel that this needs to bring, and it's a shame. As much as I love Vincent Price, I am a Vincent Price fan till the day I die. But this is the wrong film for him. I will die on that hill. You know, something I didn't realize the first time around. Coming at it again, I go, yeah, it doesn't have the right feel for some reason.
Knowing now that this is I Am Legend, like, it's insane that they cast him, and like really how sedate this whole movie is compared to like the Will Smith version. Like, this, it feels like he fits because it is a little bit sleepy when it comes to zombie movies. Although I much prefer it to White Zombie.
Yeah. And that's the thing with this, and actually George Romero will later say for Night of the Living Dead that he just goes, "Oh, I literally just nicked this off a Matheson story." And what Romero will do is he'll essentially combine this with a Hammer film, Plague of the Zombies, which came out in '67, I think it was, which is essentially taking the kind of hordes of zombies ideas, but they're giving it a voodoo kind of mind controlling context, working the mills, sort of like that, but then overruns and destruction and stuff like that. So George Romero will essentially combine the two. I Am Legend, what it does, and actually what I think this film does do well, is it gives you the feeling of desolation. You know, it opens with the wide shots of the city in ruins, and the score and everything that goes with it, and hurling the bodies into the pits, driving round, and the kind of, you know, the cracked mirrors and everything like that. It does give you that feeling of emptiness and the apocalypse and going through. I don't think it'd be like that 3 years afterwards, but
no, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, the few kind of days of his life, you see kind of like every day is like exactly the same routine, that kind of obsession with just keeping moving, keeping feeling like he's making a difference in some small way, you know, just by thinning the horde slightly each time. I mean, it's an interesting story for that, because obviously we kind of talked about like vampires and zombies, like the kind of the kind of it been blurred, you know, between kind of what monsters you're having, you know, like this. Obviously, I think in Matheson's book, and obviously it's noticeable in the Will Smith version. You know, they're very agile creatures, aren't they? The vampires, you know, when they do come out at night. But here they're shambling more like zombies, aren't they?
yeah. And
I
I'll go out. I think
don't know whether that's a practical thing, whether that's just what they could do on their budget. You know, just we'll make them look like corpses, or make them move like a corpse might move.
I think that's a thing. I think also it is Matheson is obviously, I mean, I Am Legend is kind of almost the complete antithesis of Dracula to a certain extent, where you completely break it down. It's a modern setting. It's shambling hordes of vampires rather than kind of the urbane flowing thing. So I think there's also a thing of trying to get away and make these zombies completely unaristocratic, in the way that Dracula would kind of flow across things. So these shamble. I also think with the Will Smith one, how kind of fast they are, they wouldn't have been like that 8 years before if you'd have shot it, released it in 2001 before 28 Days Later. Although you kind of had a couple of running zombies, and I'm sorry, 28 Days Later, the zombies, sue me. Before that, 28 Days Later is the reason why we now think zombies are fast. This is how it works. So I think there is also a deliberate, let's remake I Am Legend, but do them with 28 Days Later vampires.
And it's interesting having it being like a vampire pandemic, which you don't see very often. You know, so the zombie kind of rapid spreading virus is quite a common thing, you know, and it's, you know, a good way to comment, you know, have you comment on all kinds of kind of disease management by world governments and everything like that. But you don't see that with vampires very often. That's kind of marks this out. It's a bit unique, really, because vampires tend traditionally they're kind of the more person to person, aren't they? More kind of smaller scale. You know, be one hunter, you know, claiming a few victims, you know, and you know, it might slaughter like a small town or something, but it's not usually like city or countrywide. It's not usually a world event, a vampire kind of infestation. So
and again, I think that's a result of the weird thing that kind of Matheson kind of put that in one thing, and then it went obviously to this film. But then the zombie kind of, George Romero took the idea and ran with it to such an extent that now you kind of can't do it. because everyone would go either that's just I Am Legend, or you're now at a weird point that no matter if you tried to do it, people will go either they don't know I Am Legend, you go you've just done zombies and made them vampires, or you just ripped off I Am Legend.
Yeah, I mean, the only other fairly recent thing that I've seen that kind of does some idea was The Strain, because that was like a mass kind of vampire pandemic, wasn't it? Which, and in the last few kind of surviving people would, took cover in like safe space like you would with the zombie plague, and just it was like managing like the few of their population that still weren't infected, and take on hordes and stuff. So, but that was interesting because obviously being vampires, they weren't completely feral. Yeah, that they're animalistic when going into a feeding frenzy, but they could plan and they could counterattack. And I think it was in that the penultimate season. Basically, it's like the vampires had won, and they're keeping like the human population alive as their slaves. But they're basically they've got their own society, and they're basically they've got a slave workforce that they can feed on, when they fancy.
Yeah, that and the fact also there's I can't remember it, and I can't remember why people actually think of it as amazing, because I watched it, was like, oh, it's a film. You've got Daybreakers as well, which I'm fairly is that thing that it's like, oh yeah, that is a thing that people seem to like, and I'm like,
that one with Willem Dafoe and a crossbow.
Yes, I think so. Sorry, I looked at, I'm like, is Daybreakers? Is it actual apocalypse? Yes, it is. Oh, okay. So yeah, you've got that as well. But I think the influencer again of Matheson is the fact that, I mean, that Romero took it on. The interesting thing with regards to this, aside from being miscast and all the stuff we talked about, is that the ending is different. In I Am Legend, the reason for the title was the point that essentially the vampires kind of eventually they've kind of started to evolve, and on a day when 28 years later has come out, and the whole thing is there's a new evolution of the vampires, as you the zombies, as you kind of have to do, you have to, if you're going back, you have to present a new threat, so you have to evolve them in some way. The vampires by the end of this have evolved, and they can kind of go out, and they're almost like just the next step of humanity in a way, and they've kind of rounded up Neville, and they're going to kind of publicly execute him, and he realizes that he has essentially become the superstition to the vampires that the vampires were to humanity, and therefore he is the embodiment of legend for this new society, and he will be legend forevermore. And that's the kind of thing, it's a transitional thing of superstition, and still playing into the idea of legend and superstition. Last Man on Earth, such a stupid title, I'm sorry. It's so schlocky, and then, like, I Am Legend has a power about it. The Last Man on Earth kind of doesn't.
I think even Omega Man had a certain catchiness to it.
That's a proper pop. This is just not great. Essentially, there's a big kind of 15-minute chase scene, and they corner him in a church and kill him off, and therefore he's dead. I guess there's something about the whole fact that vampires can now go into a church, and it's fine. There's something about that, but then again,
that last scene did make me laugh with it when Vincent Price and his smoke grenades. Just how he kind of just tossed them aside. I was thinking, would that affect a vampire? Why are they bothered?
Well, also when he's like, my blood can save everyone, I said, is this some kind of Jesus metaphor? And then he dies in a church, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, a little on the nose here.
I'm fairly sure in the original, in the novel, I haven't read it in many years. Probably should read it at some point. I'm fairly sure there is no immunity, and he's just like luck and grit that he has managed to survive so long. It's not that I think the immunity thing is lifted from Mary Shelley's novel The Last Man, where the reason why the main character survives is that for whatever reason he is the only person with some immunity, which is why he's shambling through the remains of Rome and sails out in the year to die in the year 2100, which still blows my mind.
Hearing them explain that stuff is so funny, where they're like, yes, we made this thing, it's blood and vaccine, and I'm like, okay, so it's a vaccine. Like, maybe don't put stupid explanations of things you don't understand into your weird movie.
And obviously it was filmed in Italy, to save on money, so Vincent Price is the only one actually speaking English in it, and everyone else is stops over, so it probably doesn't help.
It's good there aren't that many people in it then, because, hey, Morgan, what are you doing? Come outside.
Apparently, you could see a very famous, like domed roof of a big Italian church in the background of one shot. So it's definitely not wherever he's meant to be in the States.
Also, I'm just going to say, because she can hear me and I'm going to get yelled at, my housemate's her birthday, and she told me if I don't give her a shout out, she's going to be very mad. So there you go, Danny. There's your shout out. Sorry. Anyway, carry on. I'm going to get yelled at if I don't do that. So yeah, let's go. So again, the vampire apocalypse is more influential than anyone realizes. Then Romero comes and turns him into the flesh-eating revived dead, and it's the flesh-eating part which I think is the cannibalism part which is taken hold, because vampires is just kind of pass it through the drinking blood and through the infection, whereas there is an infection with this, but it's also
I mean, if we can't quibble over details, there's one thing that has really annoyed me, like how inconsistent this is, because again, it's about like the blurring between vampire and zombie. So traditionally, a zombie just has to bite you to pass on the infection. A vampire has to drain your blood and replace and mix it with their blood. But some stories, as a shotgun, just have a vampire biting you being enough to infect you with vampirism. That always really annoys me. I don't know why.
I mean, even before Dracula, depictions of vampires are completely different and wild and varied. And this was half of my Dracula talk, of all the stuff leading into Dracula. And we talked about it when we did Nosferatu. So how you get turned is up for debate anyway. And with the zombies, one thing I've never worked out is how do the zombies decide who gets changed and who they just want to eat. Is it just if you're lucky and escape, you then turn into a zombie?
Yeah. Imagine turning it, but then realizing, oh, I've been half eaten.
Yeah. Oh, he's got an arm off.
Well, that's what's interesting about this being an adaptation from I Am Legend, is they are so obviously zombies. If we're watching it now, like, they're just people with some makeup on. They don't look like the vampire creatures in the Will Smith one. So there I'm more accepting of, I mean, that's not really a zombie, and I see why they don't come out in the daytime. But now, kind of reflecting on this, I'm like, why do these zombies not come out in the daytime, other than that's what was in the book?
Because they're vampires.
It's beginning to not make sense. The more I think.
Like, a lot of the changes in the Will Smith version, the readaptation, were an improvement on this. I still can't forgive them for the CG, the rush CG job on the creatures in that one, because give me slightly unconvincing grey makeup on actual actors shambling around any day over bad half finished CG Gollum.
And also, the random dog makes sense now, because in I Am Legend he has the dog, and here a dog shows up, and I'm like, okay, what is this gonna have a point? No, it's not.
It's to give a little bit of hope, and also I would point out that if you've got one character on their own I mean, the book, my copy is only 150 pages. It's probably sort of 55,000 words, but still, you kind of have to have something for the main character to interact with. Otherwise, it's incredibly dull, and you have to find a way to keep it going. So
Vincent Price basically speaking to himself for narrating his own life for a whole movie.
I will also say toast that this morning. I need to go get gas.
Also, have you read the book, Sam?
No, I've not.
I will give Sam, because Jacob won't know this. Doctor Who, I would ask you to read the first couple of pages and then go back and watch Asylum of the Daleks.
Okay.
Because her barricading herself in from all of the Daleks on the outside, Clara went before we realised she's a Dalek. That is lifted straight from the first couple of pages of I Am Legend, and it's when I was rewatching it a few years ago, I'm like, oh my god, that's just I Am Legend. Like, how did I not see that before? So yeah, people are kind of lifting this, and there was something recently I'd seen that essentially took it as well, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it was. Like the opening few pages of him going around barricading the doors and stuff like that, which you get bits of in this film. It's just not as punchy and powerful. And then him kind of at the end whacking up the volume and trying to just drown everything out to keep himself from going mad and just unleashing himself to it. There's a link.
I mean, I've not seen Omega Man. That's the one adaptation of the three I've not seen, and apparently Matheson hated that one. So,
I mean, again, like at least I Am Legend, the Will Smith version, kept the title because it has a grandeur and a power to the last person living on Earth, surrounded against all the odds, fighting against it. Like that title works. Omega Man just doesn't. It makes him like a superhero. You imagine to have like rocket boosters on his arms. It's so bad.
The twist sort of at the end of this doesn't really work for me in this movie. It's a bit silly when like cop vampires show up. I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah,
I was very confused.
It's kind of a charming thing in some ways, but at the same time,
the movie loses a lot of steam when it stops being, yes, I'm going to go out and do stuff.
Yeah, when it has that feeling of desolation, it does it really well. When it tries to hilariously enough, like turn into an action movie,
I think
that's where it falls down.
I mean, I think that probably the strongest passion is probably the flashback stuff with the family and just seeing kind of falling sick one by one. And I think it's a terrifying kind of idea that the first sign is you go blind, so it's coming, how long you've got, but it's on its way. Yes,
I'm turning into a zombie.
A vampire.
Wow.
Although therefore it is weird that sort of it's vampires in Italy, because it's like you can't have garlic, so the Italians like, oh, come on, you can't check yourself in the mirror. The Italians like, oh, come on.
That's why they had that giant thing of garlic. Just who has a string of garlic like that?
And that's one of the other things as well in this, that in the book, and I think probably in other adaptations as well, he gets himself like a greenhouse inside to grow the garlic. Yeah. Because he knows that he can't go out. He needs a constant supply, so he does it himself. Yeah. Whereas in this, I'll go out and buy more garlic. Like,
he finds it in a shop, and for some reason it's still fresh, like months down the line.
So there's just weird things like that. There's just anyway. It's probably easier when. Probably easier when they were just shooting scenes of him out in the desolation, just to have him get more garlic than get an entire new set with lots of pops, and it's probably just easier. But it's an interesting artifact. And again,
it's better than White Zombie.
It is better than White Zombie.
Again, it's an early vampire zombie apocalypse movie. It's very interesting. But then you have the issue that 4 years later, Night of the Living Dead comes out, and the entire thing goes to pot. Because now zombies are flesh-eating from beyond the grave, shambling hordes.
Yeah. Well, the other thing with this movie is it seems very like 60s. The more I'm reflecting on it, it's kind of getting a bit worse. But just going into it completely blind, and it's just Vincent Price in a zombie apocalypse, I did enjoy it. Yeah.
And again, Vincent Price is doing what he can, but he's just in the wrong role. So then we have all the zombie movies of the 70s and Dawn of the Dead and Zombie Flesh Eaters and all the stuff and Shambling Hordes, and then you go through the 80s, and by the 90s everyone kind of knows it's been done, and you've got the various zombie movies, and then comes to 2002 and the whole thing changes again, because 28 Days Later comes out.
I thought you were going to say because Ricky Gervais makes The Office.
I mean, I could have said that, but I didn't. So,
and you could tell it had an impact, because about 2 years later, when the long-awaited remake of Dawn of the Dead for Zack Snyder comes out, and the zombies run now. So.
Yep, they're bloody fast now.
They run now. They run.
I mean, Shaun of the Dead. Obviously, they're still shambling, but again, that's because it's easier. The other thing is, obviously, if they're slow moving, you don't have to move your characters as much. You don't have to go to as many different sets. if you're running, you're out of one place and into another one very, very quickly. If they're walking, you can spend more time in one location because the threat is slower approaching. So you don't have to use as many locations. You don't have to have as many stunt teams because everyone's just walking rather than leaping and jumping off buildings, running after them. It's just easier like that.
I mean, the most interesting kind of innovation in zombie movement kind of recent years for me was Train to Busan, and it's purely down to like the performance of the zombie kind of performers. Just because they're moving quickly, but they've not forgotten that they're kind of barely holding their bodies together. It's like a rictus kind of jerk kind of movement, but trying to move quickly, but almost being let down by their own bodies, and kind of stumbling over each other and stuff. It's really, really nice idea.
I still remember seeing Train to Busan on the big screen for the first time, like that I saw it, and it doesn't matter how many times you see it, the ending still hits. Like it was just like, how am I like bawling my eyes out at a zombie movie? This is not right.
Well, speaking of bawling your eyes out at a zombie movie.
We missed also talking about a very, very sad zombie movie, which is Maggie, obviously, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I remember that was a film and nothing else about it.
No, I thought really interesting. Oh yeah, Arnie doing kind of coming back to acting, doing kind of semi-serious stuff again. Oh, Abigail Breslin, she's good,
in zombie movies, especially. She's a class actor now.
But yeah, I've not retained anything about that one either. I remember them both being good in the moment, but
that's about it.
Just hasn't stayed with me. That Warm Bodies has stayed with me more than that has.
I've yet to see Warm Bodies, must be said.
Sam, you picked a very depressing movie.
Yes, I picked. So I think we're probably in agreement that the best of the three, but also by some distance the most depressing of the three.
Yes, there's real emotional weight to this movie that the other two do not have.
So this is Cargo, which 2017 Australian zombie film. It was a Netflix original at the time. It was released on that platform.
And a directorial debut as well.
Yeah, I remember seeing it at the time and not really knowing anything about it. But I thought, this might be interesting. Martin Freeman, and I was blown away by it. I was really impressed. But
I remember it coming out, but I'd never watched it until today.
So this is the first time I've watched this since COVID. And it definitely hits differently now, especially the bits about like what the government would do to manage a pandemic and kind of what they provide their population with. I mean, just like the survival kit, which like a chart of symptoms to look out for, a Fitbit, so you slap on your wrist, to count down how many hours you got left as a human.
I'll tell you what, the Fitbit is an interesting idea. I think that was actually the most interesting innovation they got in the entire film in terms of like.
And then like a handy kind of spring-loaded kind of self-euthanasia needle thing. Like spikes on sounds like a steak, isn't it? That you can put yourself out if you're in misery with.
The zip ties and bury yourself instructions.
Yeah. So this is by Yolanda Ramke and Ben Howling, based on their short film, which they put onto YouTube about 5 years before this. I watched that for the first time today, and it's essentially the same plot. Basically, it starts from the car scene, basically. So it's wife turns in the car, husband tries to get away, gets bitten, just about gets the baby out, and then turns and finally sees the zombie walking with the baby on his back, and he finds that the family who kill him and take the baby to look after. So yeah, it's kind of it's very much more compact version of like that hard hitting story. And the husband in that he's the guy who's the father of the other family they see on the riverbank, with the gun. So he's so nice that they got him back for a small role. I mean that was. I'd forgotten about that this time round. That I remember they found him again, but I'd forgotten that he'd already been bitten, and basically he's got to put his whole family out of their misery, which is So this basically, yes, both versions they come down to a dad, a baby, and zombies. So this virus, which is essentially like rabies, by the looks of it, spreads across, we presume, the world, but obviously the story set in Australia. And a couple, Matt Freeman and Susie Porter, play them, and their baby daughter. They attempt to get across Australia to safety. They start off on like a riverboat, and they've kind of been floating along steadily for a while, but they've realised they've run low on supplies. So Martin Freeman sees another boat, goes across to it, gets some supplies out, and his wife, unwise, does the same thing on her own and gets attacked by a zombie in the boat.
Women, am I right?
Yeah, Martin Freeman should have probably
Well,
said,
we're off the air now.
Yeah. My friend should have probably said, by the way, I got stuff out, but I think there was something in the back of the boat. I heard it, I could smell it, so maybe don't go in that one. Go
Also,
on your own.
Sam, doesn't the like teacher lady imply that there are safe areas outside of Australia? So it may
That's
be
true.
isolated.
That's true. I mean, it did come to me actually. So if there's one country you probably want to be in a zombie apocalypse, it's probably Australia, because there's just so much wide open space. There's places to escape to.
Dangerous
Although
animals that will kill the zombies.
yeah. The flip side of that is there's the wilderness, isn't there? And it's like, yeah, you might escape from the zombies, but you probably die of thirst or exhaustion or get bitten by obesity. So the wife gets bitten. She turns, and yeah, Matt Freeman's obviously got to take their baby Rosie and try and get to safety, but not before he's bitten himself. So there's this ticking time bomb. He knows how long he's got left, and he's just trying to get as far as possible and try and get Rosie to a safe place, or another family, to look after her. Along the way, he becomes friends with an Aborigine girl who's real good in this. I thought. Sorry, I'm trying to remember the actress's name. If anyone can find it before me.
Simone Landers as Toomey.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And they've got a really nice little kind of relationship, basically, because they just. He's kind of trying to be the responsible adult, but she's kind of wise beyond her years, and she kind of helps him out as much as he helps her out. And she's already been through all this because her dad was bitten and has turned, but she's still kind of keeping him around. She feeds him, but then puts some muzzle on him, and basically takes him out for walks, keeps him in a pit, and eventually, becomes too much, kind of buries him in a tree, essentially. A tree grows up around him. I mean, that's, I think, one of the most interesting things about this is that Aboriginal Australian kind of perspective on kind of references to their culture and their spirituality. The zombies, they're referred to as ghosts. They're missing their souls. The shadows of the former self, and that's kind of a quite an Aboriginal kind of spiritual kind of idea. They don't not see them as not people, but just people with something missing. I mean, just like the idea that famously in Australian films, you'll often get a disclaimer at the end saying about kind of how they worked with the Aboriginal elders and how they still believe, well, still believe that if you're filmed or if you've pitch taken, that's part of your soul gone, and it's about kind of we were sensitive to this, and we worked with them, and that they agreed to be in this. We've not exploited them, basically.
What's curious is at the end, like, yeah, they do delve into like, oh yeah, we put the paint on, and that keeps them away. But she says, oh yeah, the clever man will be able to cure you. Well, how does the clever man cure you? The same way we do. Stabs Martin Freeman, zombie.
Yeah, I mean,
him.
the clever man was clever enough to get out of his own cage, wasn't he? So he's obviously got something about him.
It was.
Yeah. So they're of they had John Bell, who an Aboriginal kind of advisor on this. It's kind of just go over the script to make sure, because the original short film, it's very much this white Australian family, and you don't really see another white family at the end, basically. So it's very much a kind of European settled kind of perspective, but in this, they wanted that voice in at this time, because so the Aborigines, they're just so much part of the outback of that landscape. If they're making that landscape like a character, a big part of the story, then they obviously want to be involved in it. I mean, and it's very. I'm always kind of interested in kind of representation, that you don't see every day, and I just I think it's nice that you have these characters, these Black Australian characters at the end, charging in to save the day. Essentially, it's. Um, I mean, Yolanda Ramke talked about it being like a parallel storyline. So it's two sets of fathers and daughters navigating an environment ravaged by an epidemic. And while the Brit strives to find a safe haven for his daughter, a fiercely independent Aboriginal girl tries to save her own father, but they both need each other to survive. So it's how those kind of storylines intersect. Obviously, apart from Martin Freeman, obviously, being the white outsider, but you've also got the other white characters in this general. Apart from the other family, they come across this. I mean, he's my first character is not really the traditional kind of hero. You'd have this kind of story. The kind of guy you'd normally get is the Australian who they bump
Vincent
into in the
Price.
outback. is the big burly guy with the gun, who's basically found a teenager and keeps her as a sex slave essentially, but calls her his wife. His wife,
Yeah.
but she basically, he's not my husband. So he's keeping me against my will here.
That's just, there's all these tiny little depressing stories within the overarching depressing story that just compound how depressing it is.
I mean, as you say, there is hope there, because as you said, the bump to the school teacher, and I can say, all my kids are gone now, and I'm so sorry. And she goes, no, not gone, dead. It's just gone away. Just kind of nice. I liked the metamorphosis kind of the zombies go through in this. I'm not sure exactly what the kind of biological mechanics of it, but basically, I'm going to like a chrysalis kind of form, like kind of like their eyes and their mouth kind of seal over, and then they kind of, when it kind of ends, they're like fully zombified, and they always seem to be like leaking almost like sap out of them or pus or whatever. It looks like they're covered in like honey or amber or something, don't they? It's kind of it's an interesting look for a zombie. Now, I think they did say they wanted to have a slightly different look for their their monsters, not just have like pale kind of corpse-like, but just like it was more biological and like an infection. Which kind of
that's what was kind of making me think of something like the fungal infections, a bit like Good All the Gifts or something like that, because those are based off. I can't remember what the name of the plant is, but the plant that kind of the spores go into the ants. And then it
it's a fungus, isn't it? It grows into their brain and basically drives them around, doesn't it? Like it turns them into zombies, literally.
It drives them up a tree and makes them burrow into it so they can't move, and then kind of grows out of them and uses the ant for nourishment, and then falls down again and uses that to reproduce, which I think is where The Last of Us, that's the deliberate biology come from. I'm fairly sure it's where The Girl with All the Gifts was based on as well, specifically. And so this made me actually think of that, because it looks very fungal in that sense, and that there is seemingly now becoming a thing of with the more ecocentric in the past sort of 10, 15, 20 years focus on things, there is a kind of nature strikes back version to the zombies, rather than a Christian or even a scientific one, as you got with kind of the infected through the blood rage zombies that you have, or even something like, is it Contagion, or what's the outbreak that you had in the mid 90s? It's now moved over to more of an ecological infection as well. Would be my comment on that. I don't know whether it has actually explained what the zombie are, but
it's left vague enough in this, and I think you kind of piece it together. There's kind of those hints, but I don't think it needs to be explained. It's not about that. It's purely like to give them like motivation, obviously, to get across the landscape. It's about this core relationship, this kind of father and daughter, and then this other surrogate daughter, essentially, and kind of their kind of journey. I mean, it's sort of implied that Aborigines kind of are dealing with this a lot better than the Australians in the cities would have been. Obviously, we never go to one of the big cities, but I think that's why they've ended up in the wilderness, because I presume the cities fell first, and probably the infection kind of completely took over there.
I mean,
But
Jacob,
they,
you were saying how you kind of wish you'd have done I Walked with the Zombie rather than White Zombie, but the cargo actually does bookend it quite nicely because you kind of have a reverse here that now is kind of the Aboriginal people, the non-white people that are coping much better with it, and kind of they're the ones
yeah,
not being turned into zombies,
But
whereas the White Zombie, they are.
at the same time, there's the colonial people like now moving deeper into the outback and like
yeah,
infecting that space. You know,
yeah,
not that they haven't
yeah, yeah.
before, but
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, I do like that this has basically, it's like even at the end of the world, it's like humanity is still pretty hopeless. Basically, we can't be trusted with anything. Like even when it's about it's all they can do is keep their infant daughter alive, and like the married couple are still bickering in the opening scene.
Yeah,
They're very passive aggressive towards each other. I mean, a mini domestic, and the white Australian is still racist. Still it's like, yeah, he likes shooting zombies, and yeah, he wants some a young woman around to give him gratification whenever he wants it.
yeah,
But really, he still probably prefer to shoot the Aboriginal people. He seems to. His racism overrides his zombieism. It's
yeah.
yeah.
actually using them as baits. Just to lure out the zombies, and they're just collateral for him.
Well,
Yeah.
Vic also, he is smart. Like, yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah, yeah,
hoard all the gas and I'm gonna get all the shiny stuff off these
yeah.
zombies that I loot.
He's
Um,
a classic bushman. He's very practical, and he's got all the kit, and he knows how to survive in that world. It's his. He's like the alpha, like the dominant kind of pred, predator in that part of the world, I suppose.
but he also, it's revealed, killed all of his coworkers in a gas company, which
Yeah,
Willie, the father of what's her name, Toomey,
Yeah.
yeah,
the shirt that he wears is from that gas
mm,
company too.
yeah,
So, all these fun
mm.
little like sort of story building things
Yeah, yeah.
connect
Again, they
like
don't.
that.
I like that it gives the audience enough credit to just put that together for yourself. It's there if you're looking for it. But, they
Yeah.
don't need to spell it out. They don't need to lay it out with like a lot of exposition, or let me tell you how I got here. We can work it out. um, yeah, so I like that. It's sharp and it's restrained, but it's emotionally intelligent as well, and it can absolutely destroy, because it's just that core kind of relationship from his dad, just wanting to get his daughter to safety, knowing that he's not going to see her grow up. He's not going to be around for her, and he just wants to just put anything to kind of give her a fighting chance. I mean, even at best times in zombie apocalypse, you're gonna have your wits about you to stay alive. But for a baby, it's just think, right, ticking clock. I've just got to get her as far as I can, and just hope for the best, basically.
And I mean, it brings together a couple of really good things together. One is that Australia has always done desolation very well,
Yeah,
because most of it is just,
Of
it's not
Smaug.
emptiness, but it is
yeah,
emptiness.
yeah.
You know?
I mean, Australia. I say that they're one of the top countries for horror filmmaking in general, but it's nice to have many of those that they have like the landscape from a start as a starting point.
Yeah.
If you've got that as your starting point, then you don't need to add much more to make it absolutely horrifying.
You think of Mad Max, you think of Razorback that we did, Lake
Yeah,
Mungo
yeah,
is good, Wolf Creek, which I wasn't a massive fan of, but it's still using the fact that essentially you're in the middle of nowhere pretty much wherever you go that isn't kind of one of the big
yeah,
cities around the edge,
uh,
and you're kind of
yeah.
stranded.
I mean, Dangerous Animals out last week. Jai Courtney. Literally, it's a slasher movie, but the slasher villain just throws you to the sharks.
Yeah,
It's again using that environment to your advantage.
yeah. I got another point as well about Australia, and I cannot remember what it is now.
Well, I think Martin Freeman. I mean, he's definitely good in this, but I feel like there could be like someone. I don't know. I guess he's just supposed to be normal dad. But when I think
That's every
zombie,
Martin Freeman role ever.
when I think zombie
but obviously,
apocalypse, I don't think Bilbo Baggins.
yeah, Yeah, I mean, they also felt like they had to have a star in it, to put, it's probably when Netflix said, "Oh, yeah, we'll fund you, but get a star in the lead." Martin
Yeah.
Freeman, yeah, great, yeah, he's big in Sherlock at the moment. Yeah, well,
They couldn't
And he had
find
done
like
the Hobbits, so
they couldn't have found an Australian person. Like they when you have to say, oh yes, his accent shows that he's more of an outsider in this landscape. Like I mean,
yeah,
get an Australian, get Mel Gibson.
no. In every way, no.
Get Chris Hemsworth.
I'm surprised that Vic never insulted him. As he kind of says, you coming here, taking our fuel, our food, but he doesn't call him a pom. He doesn't insult like his accent or anything, which that kind of guy would definitely do. He'd get personal quick, I think.
I will probably go out on a limb and say that probably he wasn't meant to be non-Australian in the scripts, and they just happened to cast Martin Freeman because he was a star and it worked.
Say mate a few more times and you're good.
Yeah, I would say that is he wasn't meant to be. He could. I'm actually surprised that he didn't put on an Australian accent. I was kind of half expecting it. But that would be my reasoning.
Here in the epic.
Yeah.
Then again, Martin Freeman with an Australian accent would just be like wrong. I would have to reset my reality router a few times.
He pulled off a Minnesota accent in the Fargo TV series, so he can do it.
I was going to say, does he have an American accent in Marvel?
Yeah, he does.
Yes, he does, because he works for the CIA. Yeah, just a generic kind of.
Yeah, but Australian would just be wrong,
Yeah. And this isn't to say, like, he's obviously supposed to be just a normal guy in this, but, like, I don't know. You could find somebody better. I guess he just came pretty cheap. Maybe he really liked the script. I don't know, but
probably both.
Yeah.
Probably brought a lot in. He liked the script, and again, if you've done sort of, quite a few blockbusters, you might want something that's just a palate cleanser, something a little bit different, and something like this does give the scope for an actor to bring out some more kind of quietly intense. I've heard it described as a kind of, you've got that intensity, but it's not in massive like violent outbursts. It's in there simmering underneath the surface, and Martin Freeman does do that quite well because he's the ordinary man and therefore very reserved and showing that intensity underneath it. I can see why Jacob's like wrong casting, because you just see him as Martin Freeman. I
wouldn't say wrong. I would just rather see somebody different personally, but it's fine.
Yeah. It's not that he's bad, but somebody else might have been better.
Maybe. Again, I do think it's just, they want a star in here, and I couldn't think of a well enough known, unless you go for Hemsworth, it's like, which Australian are you going to have in this role? And I think having Thor in this will be even more distracting.
Sam Neill.
I don't think Chris Hemsworth would be good for it. He's too much of the strong guy. Like, you do need someone who's convincing it. Like, I don't think this guy shot a gun before when he's learning in that scene. So, like, Martin Freeman's not bad. Just, I would like to, maybe somebody deep fake some options for me. Let me see what I think.
Yeah. But I think overall, Cargo is a really kind of interesting take on zombie film. I think it kind of.
It is.
I think at this point, I thought it was a bit played out. I was thinking, what else can you do kind of with zombies now? But this, and then like a few others afterwards, I think it's still proof that there's plenty of thematic ground, to kind of plow through still. I think as long as you get the core kind of emotions and characters right, then you're onto a winner really. And Australia is equally kind of the ideal escape from a zombie apocalypse, but equally makes it a much more terrifying prospect. So
what was that baby eating through most of the 48 hours?
I don't know.
Her dad.
Yeah.
She's already a zombie throughout the whole thing, didn't you know?
That is what the zombies do. They just eat like meat. It's not necessarily human, but they will obviously eat people. But Yep, just meat it's enough for these.
Well, zombies will also eat sharks, so.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that's that on Cargo. There's tons of zombie stuff. Go watch it. Go read it. Go read Max Brooks. His dad is a director. He wrote World War Z.
I was going to say, not all the zombie stuff is incredibly dull and derivative. There are some interesting ones out there amidst the schlock.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for this episode, but we'll be back next week with something else. Until then, where can people find you?
You can find me at SSB Thinks Film and at the Second Cut Pod Substack, where this week I published my review of the live-action How to Train Your Dragon remake, which I did enjoy, as unnecessary as it was. It still kind of hit me in the feels because I just love that story and those characters, and seeing a new glossy version of it, I was perfectly happy with. Thinking back to my film magazine stuff, I've not written specifically about Cargo, but I've written about other Australian horrors. I did a top 10 Australian horrors list some time ago, so dig that up on the film magazine if you like.
Yep. Hopefully you don't find me anywhere. If you do, I'm K-Judgmental in the various places. Don't think I have anything new up at the moment, but I am hoping to get to 28 years later, and in the next few days, and get that up when I work out exactly how I'm going to work out my regular travel arrangements into Cardiff, so that I don't have to park somewhere and get tickets and that's another story. Anyway, so yeah, I'm hoping to get to see that, and if I get to see anything else, I may shove it up as well.
And you can find me at Jacob Film Guy. If we're using film magazine stuff, I wrote about The Man Alone, which is a trope in Australian film because of its colonial past. You can read my essay about that Taika Waititi vampire movie, What We Do in the Shadows. There we go.
Hey.
Which, that's not a zombie, but there's werewolves and vampires. So, and Australia.
I would like to point out that on TFM I also did do a Where to Start with Bela Lugosi, and I did have White Zombie in there.
Nice. Well, go read that stuff because it will be up until 2030. Thank you for watching, listening, and we'll see you next time.
Adios.
Brains.